Hey guys, welcome back to Matthews Ballistics. Today I had planned on doing some testing with the 338 Lapua, but I was unable to finish doing all the loading for it, so we're going to just be testing the 6.5 Creedmoor AR, be testing some 95 grain VMAX, and I've loaded those over IMR 4166, and hopefully we get some good results out of it. So I'm gonna head to the range, we're gonna get geared up, and we'll see you when we get there. Alright, so before we get into the actual results and shooting part of this test, I want to say some malfunctions did happen and some mistakes were made on my part. Now I want to start with the mistakes made using this rifle. Go ahead and show you. Not loaded. This is my AR-10 that I built using Wilson Combat bolt, Wilson Combat barrel, and gas block for that barrel. It's a 16-inch barrel, 6.5 Creedmoor chambered, and then I used Aero Precision upper and lower, and then mag pull, grip, and stock, and some other parts. I used an Aero Precision AMB charging handle, and then I've got a Burris RT5. See if you can see that. Get that focus there. Probably won't, but it's an RT5 prism scope, which is kind of rare. It's kind of a new thing. It's only been out for just a little while. The RT5 is a fixed 5-power prism scope, for those that don't know and don't already know, and that's the reason why it looks kind of funny. It's set so far back on my rifle, because at full length here I've got about give or take 3 inches of eye relief, because it is in fact a scope. It is not a red dot, although it does have an illuminated function. I prefer not to use illuminated functions. I've just never found in my personal experience them to be of any advantage, so I try to, if I can buy something that doesn't have an illuminated function, I go for that usually. With that being said, I do own a Canik TP9 SFX pistol, and that was one of Canik's quote-unquote race-ready pistols that had come with a red dot, a Viper or Vortex Viper red dot, and I love it. It shoots great. It's extremely accurate. Probably the most accurate handgun I've ever shot. I won't say accurate, but the most precise handgun. Like, as far as printing on target, repeatedly. When you get on target, you shoot. Those rounds hit, as long as you're doing your part and you're holding it steady, those rounds hit exactly in the same spot every time. And, and I've had some Glocks with red dots on them. I've even had a Glock 20 SFX, a Glock 20 10mm with I actually mounted a scope to it, a fixed 4-power scope to it. And it shot great, but it honestly didn't print the groups that this Canik did, which was pretty interesting to find out. I thought that, putting a scope on a pistol would have been fantastic, especially a 10mm automatic pistol, or semi-automatic pistol like the Glock is. Of course, not automatic. Could you imagine shooting an automatic 10mm? That would be insane. Anyways, so we had some malfunctions. First big malfunction, I over oiled the gun. For the first 20-30 rounds, it which you will see it functioned flawlessly, cycled really well, probably better than normal. And then after that, it started diminishing in reliability and like how it was cycling and feeding the ammunition because it started getting dirtier. And when you over oil something and then you add a bunch of dirt to it, it gets gummed up, and you end up with this scenario of things getting really tight fitting and really sticky, especially in the chamber and the weapon. So we ended up about 40 rounds into making this video, and we were unable to continue making the video because we were just having too many malfunctions with the rounds sticking in the chamber and some other things. All right, so second problem, second malfunction unrelated to over oiling was I had primers ejecting from the brass, and then some of those primers were getting, bound up inside the chamber and bound up inside the action of the rifle, and were, causing it to not fully lock and go into battery. So it basically, I pull the trigger and be like click. You just hear this, the click of the firing pin, and that's it. And that's basically because, and if you look close in the video, you can actually see the bolt was not fully forward where it should be in the right position. So there was no way the firing pin could strike the primer. So had some of those. And then the third problem was, again, my fault, was which actually led to the problem of the primers ejecting, was that when I reamed the primer pockets on the rounds, I tried to speed up the process, and I tried to cut corners, and I tried to expedient the process and speed everything up, and that's where I screwed up, is that I took the reaming tool out of the hand reaming handle, or so you can comfortably grab a hold of it and ream it by hand, and I took that apart, and then I put it, chucked it in a drill, and thought to myself, well, hey, I can just drill these, one right after the other and be fine. Well, I ended up occasionally over reaming some primer pockets. They got a little too loose, and the primers ejected, and some of them got a little too deep, and then I had light strikes on the primers, and it took 2 to 3 times to actually of trying to fire them to get them to go off. So this is, some learning experience, quite a bit of learning experience. And the biggest thing, my biggest takeaway from this is that I will never try to salvage a Gila brass. I mean, if I've got the time to sit there and hand ream the primer pockets, or if I've got the time and literally the energy, because resizing the Aguila brass is insane. Like, it's heavier. And also, there's one thing I'm going to try to inquire into this video. I'm going to try to keep up with that. Is one thing I noticed with the Aguila brass. Of course, this is a 338 Lapua round that I'm planning on testing. It's got a certain OAL and a certain amount of powder in there, but unrelated. This is just for a representation of what I'm talking about. Even though the Aguila brass is super tough and super hard to resize, I noticed something with it when I had an issue. When I had a malfunction and it tried to, we had a failure to eject. Okay, we had a failure to eject, and so that means there's a casing still stuck in the chamber. But the bolt still run back and grabbed another round and tried to shove it in behind that casing that was stuck. And of course, the bullet hit the tip and it just come to a halt. What I noticed was the deformations of the casing were weird. They were a little weird. Is they were folding just about an eighth, between an eighth and a quarter inch below the shoulder of the casing. They were folding like there's a weak spot, and it was consistently in about 3 cases that that this occurred during my testing, which you're going to see, and I will try to bring those cases up, in our review at the end of the video and show you what I'm talking about. But they were folding between 3/8 and probably, a quarter or 3/8 inch below the shoulder. The casing was folding there and not at the neck, which I thought was weird because in other firearms and other rifle cartridge firearms that I've encountered this problem, they usually fold or fail or give right around the neck in that crease there. That's already a crease there, it's already a weak point. But these were not, they didn't have that. They didn't have the weak point here. They had the weak point back below the shoulder. And I think that maybe this was because of the way that Aguila was designing their brass. Maybe it was a manufacturing, flaw, or maybe they thought in manufacturing that, we could beef up this area of the brass and beef up this area of the brass and still be able to run really high pressure through it. And it'll be great, because the back half of your brass receives most of the force, and then the front half receives most of the stretching, part of it. But where their failure point, where it was getting weak and actually folding, was back behind the shoulder. So I don't know. It's just something that I observed, and I hope, hopefully I remember later to include that in this video. But at this time, that's just problems that I wanted to point out before you guys go into watching all this. And I hope you watch the whole thing. I know that it's going to be a long video. Sorry for that. But I hope that it's an educational video, and I hope that it's an informative video, and hope that you guys can point out and see, like, oh yeah, I know what he's talking about. But anyways, we'll get into this, and then at the end of it, we'll look at the targets. Alright, so we're testing some 6.5 AR, or 6.5 Creedmoor in the AR-10. Pretty proud of this gun, the way it worked out. I was able to run about 400 rounds through it before having to actually tear it apart and clean it before it started to malfunction and not feed the ammo. I'm going to run some store-bought 95 gram VMAX. I'm going to chronograph it and see how it's shooting, and then I'm going to run my hand loads of 95 grain VMAX, and we'll see how they go. Just do 5 of these at a time. It's 3,028. $3,078. $3,075. $3,096. All right, they all fed good, no problems. You go check the target and see how we did. Alright, so shooting about an inch to the right and about 2 inches high. So I readjusted the scope just a little bit. I'll shoot 5 more. $3,044. $3,078. $3,096. $3,034. I'm going to take a look at the target. Alright, so this is the first group. Like I said, shooting a little high and to the right. Moved it over just a little bit and shot the next group, this 5-round group, and it's shooting, looks like just a little bit low, so I'm going to move it up one more notch. This scope that I'm using, the clicks are 1 MOA each, so every click moves it about an inch at 100 yards, so about half an inch at 50 yards. So I'll move it 1 click and should bring it up right close to dead center. Went ahead and moved it up 2 clicks. I'm going to go ahead and shoot the last 7 rounds out of this box. And then we'll get on to testing my ammunition. (3,100 feet per second). 3,117. 3,114. 3,163. 3,158. 3,109. 3,128. Alright, so this is 7 more shots added to that, and it looks like we're doing pretty good. The only thing I did to this factory ammunition was I used the Lee factory crimp die, and I added a little bit of a crimp to these. That way, just in case the reciprocating action of the bolt shoving the round into the chamber doesn't actually, if it hangs up in any way, hopefully it would keep it from shoving the bullet up in the casing and causing any pressure issues. So that was the only thing I did, was I added a factory crimp to it. So now I'm going to change targets, and then we'll start testing my ammunition. Alright, so now we're going to get on to testing my ammunition using the IMR 4166 powder. I'm going to start out at the 40.1 grains, and then we'll keep moving up. This is also using the Aguila brass that is really heavy. Hopefully, and I'll show you in a little bit why I'm trying to use it instead of the Hornady brass, is because the Hornady brass gets beat up by the AR and gets dents all in it, where the Aguila brass I think is tough enough to handle it. Or 40.1 grains. $29.92. Got an error on that one. $3,057. $3,005. Had a malfunction. Error. Those seem to all do pretty well. I had one little hang up there. We got a 40.4 grains. 29.75. $29.94. $29.78. $1,111. That says 33.20, but I don't think that that's right. Let's go check the target out. Alright, so first 5-round group at 40.1, not too bad. Second 5-round group at 40.4, shooting, it looks like a little bit left. That could be me. I'm going to put up a new target and we're going to keep going up in powder. Alright, moving on to 40.7. $3,007. $3,038. $3,033. $3,020. $3,099. Alright, we go to 41 grains. Move to the second target on there. 3,053. 3,034. 2996. 3,006. 3,008. 'Alright, so here's our group for the 40.7 and then 41.0, and I think this is mostly me pulling it off, but we're going to keep seeing where we're going with the velocity and keep going up, checking the targets. The next two are going to be 41.3 and then 41.6. 3105. 3,093. 3,050. 3,040. 3,049. 41.6. 3023. 3040. 3043. 3048. 3108. Check the target and change it out. So at 41.3 there, the group was pretty wide, and then at 41.6 it got really tight and only has a vertical dispersion. So changing just 0.3 of a grain can mean a huge difference. Yeah. The brass off a shotgun shell. Alright, we're going to go to 41.9 and then 42.2. We're almost done here. .9 grains. Well, we'll have to talk about that in a second. $29.91. What the heck is going on? There's like a light strike on the primer there. 3026. $3,079. Well, I don't know what's going on with these. $29.98. $3,060. Had a couple light strikes on primers there. Not sure why. When using the Sakila brass, I had to ring the primer pockets on them, and I think that some of them may have gotten a little bit ringed too much. I've had two malfunctions where the primers come out of the casing and then wouldn't let the bolt close all the way on the next round. And then I've had two where there was a light strike on the primer, which could be because the primer was seated too far into the primer cup of the casing. So I kind of figured that I was going to have a couple of those malfunctions. I'll more or less weed that brass out and not use it again, and that way I can just get rid of the brass that didn't work well and then use the brass that did. So 42.2 grains. Man. Another primer. Definitely be throwing away those pieces of brass. $31.10. Well, that's a problem. another little bit of a malfunction there, but not a big deal. I just lost about 43 grains of powder. So when I went to eject it, it pulled the bullet or the casing out, and the bullet stayed in the barrel. So it's probably getting a little bit dirty at this point, but we're gonna finish the rest of this up, and then I'll have to go clean this thing again. $29.91. Yeah, I think we're just getting really dirty now. I think we're about to have to call it a day because we're starting to have some pretty good malfunctions. This one here going into the chamber, I guess when it was hit the feed ramp going up in there, it actually bent the casing right here below the shoulder. So I think the Gala brass is just really having a hard time here. And I may just not ever use any of it ever again because, you know, as much as I want to use it, I'm clearly having a big issue with the brass itself. Having to ream the primer pockets, the amount of pressure it takes to reload it, it's really hard on your dies and equipment. So I'm thinking I may just get rid of it altogether and just stick with using good Hornady brass. It's 3,000 feet per second. So I'm gonna go get that target and take a look at it. Alright, so there's our 41.9 grain group. It actually is not bad, it looks pretty good. And the 42.2, I was only able to get 3 rounds of that to work. 2 of them had malfunctions. One where the bullet came out on one of them when I had a jam and had to clear the jam. And then the second one, the casing actually bent and wouldn't actually chamber. So I think I'm going to have to just stick with Hornady brass. So I'm going to go back, I'm going to shoot some of this Hornady ammo and see how it runs now that the gun's pretty dirty, and see if it runs better than my Gila reloads. Shoot 10 rounds of some factory Hornady through the P-mag, and then I'm going to shoot 10 rounds through the metal mag. Just going to shoot on some steel down here at 100 yards. Got a jam. I'll have to pull that round for sure.
You got tools in the back of the car.
Huh? This thing is so temperamental.
What?
I said it's so temperamental. Like, every once in a while it just doesn't like one and doesn't want to extract or something.
Pretty typical Friday.
But so far, I've not had a malfunction that required any tools to fix. Got this metal mag out. I did the same thing again. Can you pull that mag? You have to pull down hard on it. See, it didn't extract the first round like it was supposed to because it's getting dirty. Yeah, that'll have to be pulled. That bolt will have to be pulled. It got shoved up in there just like this one. Note to self on ARs. You're not going to get more than about 50 rounds through it before you have to tear it apart and clean it. Because the chamber's dirty.
Well, no, you need.
Huh?
You hadn't found a powder load it likes yet.
I mean, it likes that. I think the chamber's just getting dirty as hell. But it's still doing it. It's getting where it's just not extracting that round from the chamber. I think that's it for today.
Huh?
So I think that's it for today.
I would. If it was me.
Alright, so before we take a look at the targets, I'm going to talk about the load data going from 40.1 to 42.2, which is where we started, shooting 5-shot groups. And from 40.1, I'm going to kind of skip over some things, but even at 40.1, we were shooting a little over 3,000 feet per second average. And then at 42.2 grains, we're still just shooting a little over 3,000 feet per second average. It was not a huge significant gain in velocity from 40.1 to 42.2. So, uh, in fact, the most stable group area I think that I was able to record was at, oh, I'm trying to see here. I'm going to say the most stable group was at 40.7 grains. We got a 3007, a 3038, 3033, 3020, and 3099. Now, shooting ammunition in a gas operated system. Okay, so as soon as the bullet passes the gas port, and it's still got, some barrel left, okay, to gain velocity or whatever, but as soon as it passes the gas port, a very significant amount of pressure is released from behind the bullet. So the driving force pushing the bullet through the barrel is now much less. If you can see what I'm saying. And that gas and pressure and driving force is diverted to push the bolt back, and then once the bolt goes back, it ejects the round and then grabs a hold of the new round and loads it into the chamber. So shooting a semi-automatic, you're going to get a very high difference in velocity for these. Like, there's no way to get, I don't think, in a semi-automatic scenario, to get it down to where you have an extreme spread that's only 20 feet per second, or only 10 or 15 feet per second, or smaller. I don't think that, I mean, things would have to be perfect for you to be able to get that. The amount of gas released inside the chamber, the way the powder is burning, and everything would have to be perfect to get it down to only 10 or 15 feet per second of extreme spread. So, in my opinion, uh, this is where, like, if you're loading for an automatic rifle, you need to focus on group size and not so much your velocity discrepancies. I would think that you need to focus on repeatability of group size. So if you got one that runs a group size that you really like, and a group spread, what you really like, then try to focus on that, and try to repeat that result through the process. So with that being said, we're gonna get into this because some of these groups had extreme spreads well over 100 feet per second, which was expected in shooting a semi-automatic weapon that is gas operated. Now, shooting weapons that are recoil operated, and shooting weapons that are, how they like shooting a revolver, or shooting a lever action or something like that, or shooting a bolt action. Those are completely different than something that is gas operated. So we're gonna look at these groups. That's the high pressure one. I'm gonna go to the groups where we started out at. Some of these got dropped and kind of mixed up here. So this one, I don't know. Let's see. Alright, so 40.1 grains. This is our 40.1 grain group. Again, this is at 50 yards from a 16-inch 6.5 Creedmoor, and we're shooting a 5-power prism optic. So basically, through that optic, it's got a half horseshoe, which goes around the top, and it's got a center dot, and then it's got a line down below it and hash marks down below that for elevation. So it's basically, it's a type of combat reticle. Um, but anyways, and all the, all the little hash marks have, values or whatever. But this is our first group at 40.1. And then we moved to 40.4, and I was doing my best to shoot exactly the same every time. And this is a 5-round group, so there's 3 rounds in this really tight hole here, which I thought was great. But again, you can see that the generally the group is shooting a little left. Of course, the way I'm feeling this, it looks right, but it's actually left. Let's see. All right, look back. Okay, and then 40.4 grains here. By the way, getting a little confused on my target. And then 40.7 was here. And then 41 grains. So the groups are changing. They change a little bit with the amount of powder charge you're using. And the change is usually either vertical horizontal or vertical. When you change powder charge, it's kind of weird. It's like a dynamic flow of things. And then 41.3, still not great, not where I want it. And then here we go, we got something that's looking promising at 41.6. So all of a sudden, all the rounds are like, and that's like right there at the bullseye where I want it. And then at 40.9, again, we got 3 rounds close to the bullseye, 2 a little high. But again, it's gas operated system. You're going to have those sorts of issues. And then the last 2 groups, this is a 5-shot group, and it's a little funky. I don't know exactly what happened there, and then to confirm it, I shot the same group again. And this was about the time that I was having some jamming issues and really having some problems with the firearm itself. So I think as far as group size goes, my 41.6 group was my ideal grouping. It was hitting where I was wanting it to hit, and the velocity on it's actually pretty consistent too. We got 3023, 3040, 3043, 3048, and then the last one was 3108. So I don't know exactly what happened there when it jumps up like 60 feet per second or something. I don't know. I don't have an explanation for it. It was so consistent up to that point. And you can tell the first round was 3023. So you could argue that the 3023 was your cold round, and then 3040, 43, 48, that's the barrel heating up, and then it gets to a certain temperature, and then 3108, that's as tight as it gets, and it just produces that much more speed. So anyways, I think the 41.6 grain load is what I'm going to focus on for this rifle. And then I'm planning on, because the barrel is Wilson Combat and because it's a match grade barrel, I'm planning on maybe having the chamber polished in it a little bit, because I want this rifle to be able to reliably feed 200 rounds without failure. before it needs to be cleaned. Okay, like I want it to be somewhat like a battle type rifle. I just want the reliability, and that's one thing. There's, with accuracy, you have to sacrifice reliability, and with reliability, you have to sacrifice some accuracy, and that's kind of the way it goes with building an AR. They're not always going to run perfect every single time. That's just not going to happen. I don't care if you spend $400 for an AR or if you buy a $3,000 AR. And this AR in particular, with the optic, I have about $2,500 in it. Without it, it's around $1,900, $2,000 without the little Burris RT5 on it. Of course, I bought the Burris RT5 right when it first came out and paid full price for it. Probably and then some before. I'm sure it's come down a little bit. But anyways, yeah, so there's a lot to take away from this testing that, you can't jump to conclusions and say that, oh, this is your problem, or oh, that's your problem, or whatever. I mean, I did have one round that chambered good, but I had a light strike on the primer, and when I went to eject the round and like rechamber or whatever, well, the bullet stayed in the barrel, and the casing come out and filled the entire gun up with, fresh gunpowder. So, unburnt gunpowder. And then I had to kind of clean it out as best as I could to continue testing, and I think that caused a lot of the issues with it gumming up later in the testing and causing some jamming issues. But I mean, there's just a lot to think about and a lot to go over. Like, shooting a semi-automatic weapon is not as easy as people think it is, and especially building one, and then building one with a purpose. It's very, very difficult. You know, when it's running right, it's fantastic. It's amazing. It shoots accurately. It hits hard. It does everything you want it to do. But like like everything else, like it's gonna have its day where it's not gonna function the way you want it to, and everything's gonna go wrong. Everything that you try is not gonna work, and you need to be able to be prepared for that. And I'm gonna try to do my best to prepare the weapon for that and get it in the most functional capacity that I can get it in. So, with that being said, I thank you guys for watching this video. I know it's extremely long and extremely drawn out, but thanks for watching. We'll see you next time.